Hello and welcome to Differential Discussions. I'm Melissa,
I'm Dave.
and we're here today to talk to you about how to find a good area on a peripheral blood smear to do a diff. So we'll talk about diff, red cell morph, platelet.
So, Melissa and I was talking about this a little bit before we started, but I always took my slides, right, come fresh off the stainer, and I hold them up to my lab coat or over just like a piece of paper, and I just want to look at the slide, make sure I got my feathered edge, and the structure of the slide kind of makes sense. And then when I put it down on the stage, I'm making an educated guess as to where I feel is a good place to start. And then from there we start at 10, right, Melissa?
Yes, start at 10. And you can see if we go, a little bit further out, we're in that feathered edge.
Mm-hmm. And never start on oil, please. Never start on oil. I know a lot of people first starting out doing microscopy, peripheral blood smears. There's a temp, you're tempted just to get down to business, but 10x is really, really valuable. Don't skip that.
Yeah, and we scan the slide a lot in the lab. We'll scan for platelet clumps. We scan to see if some of the bigger cells or more of the white cells have been pushed into the feathered edge. We scan all the time just to make sure the distribution is okay. So it's always worth it to keep it on 10. Do your scan, find where you want to drop down, and then drop down.
Agreed.
So let's go a little bit deeper now. What do you think about this area? Is this a good area that we should be starting in?
It looks a tad thin. We see these big gaps of white. See those big gaps of white, kind of an indication we're a little on the a little too thin. When you see the distribution of red cells, so the red cells are going to be your key here, right? So when you see the red cells start to settle into an even distribution, then you can start to think about being in a decent area.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what we're looking for too.
Very good. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
If we're looking at white cells, maybe this is a good area to start.
That's a great point.
But if we're looking at red cells or platelets, we don't want to start here for morphology or platelet estimates.
So yeah, so what Melissa's talking about is it's starting in a relatively thinner area for the differential is not a bad idea because you lose very little quality in white cell morphology being in a thinner area, and that gives you more real estate, I guess might be an okay word to use, to as you go progressively deeper into the thicker areas to complete your 100 cell diff, you have more space, because once you get to thick areas, white cells become very difficult to distinguish. I mean, Melissa and I have been doing this for a really long time, and at some point they're just purple blobs.
Yeah. And especially if you're dealing with a lower white cell count, starting in that thinner area might be nice.
Yep, very much so.
But in general, we'll go a little bit.
Yeah, that's looking much better, right?
So on 10, this looks like a good area.
Yep, to my estimation.
Let's go down to 40 and see.
Yeah, much better. So this is where I think, and how much of this is my own and how much of this is a textbook, it's hard to discern nowadays. But you want the red cells to be far apart from one another, but maybe like 5% of them or so are touching and overlapping, and I think that's good. That's a good area for morph. So yeah, this looks good.
Okay. And just to note, we wouldn't do red cell morph on 40x.
No. Yeah, sorry.
So we're on 40. We would use it to help find our area in particular, and it depends on you know, where you are in your training. If you're a student, you're going to be doing everything on 100. You're going to be doing your differential, the morphology, the platelet, and but you can still use 10 and 40 to find the good areas, or even to find cells if you're doing it on a really low white cell count. But, you know, once you are a trained tech and you're working and you're doing your diffs on 40 or 50x, you've been trained to do that. So don't jump the gun if you haven't been trained and you don't have the experience. Don't jump to doing things on 40 that you don't have to do, because you need that to see that detail. All right, so you want me to move around a little bit so we can see?
Sure.
So I'm just going a little bit thicker. You can see more of the overlap over here.
Yep, a bit more overlap. Yep.
So see all this area. Oh, that was a bad one to pick. I think it's this one. Yeah, it's this one. Okay, so you can see like in the here, right here, there's some clumps. I know my drawings are just kind of getting in the way now. Like these, you can see where the red cells are starting to clump on top of each other. It's important to note that it's not Rouleau at this point. It's just we're in a little bit of a thicker area.
Yeah. Let's go way thick. Melissa, take me to the place where you see people.
Start.
Where you've seen people before, where they're like, what do you think this is? And you're like, whoa.
I think it's purple blob.
So this is the beginning. Yeah, this is the beginning of the end, so to speak. So here we have that quote unquote Rouleau phenomena, right? This is not Rouleau. This is not Rouleau. Rouleau doesn't go away no matter where you go on the slide, right? So Melissa made this come to be. We were in a previous spot where you didn't see anything like that, right? But when you see this characteristic kind of chaining of red cells like that, way too thick to perform platelet evaluation, red cell evaluation, and it's likely starting to get very difficult for white cells too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So let's go back. Yeah, so not a bad area.
Nope, that looks good to me.
Okay. You want me to pop down?
Yeah, let's go to oil. So we were on a 10x dry, we're on a 40x dry, and we've now gone down to 100x oil. And then a good thing to note here, as we move the objectives, we go to higher power objectives, we need more light. So Melissa's adjusting the lamp right now to compensate. Beautiful.
Okay. All right, so then if you're doing a diff, again, you can start thinner. You can start in this area. Again, I think it really depends on the number of white cells that the patient has. But this wouldn't be a bad area to start. Now start thinking about, where would I go to evaluate red cell morphology?
Yeah. So
what do you think about this area, Dan?
Yeah, I don't think this is a bad area to do morph, red cell morph. You could probably go a little bit thicker and maybe actually what might be a good exercise here. What if we went too thin?
Too thin.
What do you think about too thin? And let's look at our red cells and see what starts to happen to them. Perfect. Yep. So here we can see that our biconcave disc structure is basically gone, right? These are just smushed down flat red cells. And because the red cell's not resting on the slide comfortably, you are not going to be able to make a good assessment of what's going on with the red cells. You might be able to see inclusions, you might be able to see some stuff, but not a great area.
No, everything is going to look like a spherocyte.
Yep, definitely.
So we don't want to be in this area. let's go back to where we were ish.
Yeah, and then as we move thicker, we start to see our central pallor starts to come more apparent, and the red cells look comfortable. I'm doing air quotes. So the red cells look comfortable.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about the actual morphology on a different
Yes.
video so that we can look at different findings. But this is a good area. Let's go really thick again.
Yeah, good. That's a good idea. Yeah. Yep. And then again, and again, we've lost central pallor on some of the red cells because they're just piled on top of each other. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't want to be here. So let's
Nope.
go back.
So then how many fields should they be, should people be using to assess red cell morphology?
So I think this depends on the different institutions. So if you're working at an institution, your institution may say X number of fields. If you're in a school, your school may say X number of fields. It's going to really depend on where you are. But generally, it's going to be between 5 and 10, closer to 10. This way, you're really getting a good grasp of what is the overall morphology across the whole slide.
Yeah, and we didn't rehearse this, and that's what I had in my head. I had 5 to 10. 5 to 10 is my magic number. Usually I look at 5, and if I feel pretty good about what's going on, and then it's also taken into account my 10x evaluation. I mean, that might sound a little overwhelming to some, but on 10x you can get an idea of red cell morphology to a degree, right? And it's kind of
at least the distribution of it, definitely.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's where you might say, this slide is pretty homogeneous, so I'm just going to evaluate 5 fields. But then you might get into another slide that says, wow, the distribution of morphology is very heterogeneous, so I might want to do 10 fields across the whole slide so that I can see the different morphological features.
Yep, I agree.
And then platelets.
Yeah, and then platelets. Yeah, no, very good. So I tend to look for these like really great areas for red cell morph, and I tend to share that area with my platelet estimates. Does that work for you too, or
I go a hair thicker.
A hair thicker.
I go a hair thicker usually. Yep. I find if I do it in this area, my platelet estimate's a little bit low.
A little low, yeah.
So I go a hair thicker. So you'd go from here to here. So maybe in the last field we had like you were saying earlier, maybe there was like 2 to 3 to 5% overlap of red cells, and here we're inching a little bit higher. Maybe there's 6 or 7 or 8% overlap of those red cells, and I just find that boop makes it more accurate, at least for me. So
no, that's I do my red cell morph first, just trying to think of my flow. I do my red cell morph first, and then I just give a little twist, just go that little bit thicker, and then count them up and then check against the analyzer. Yeah,
absolutely. Very good. Cool. And then you're just going to count the number of platelets that we see. So including the ones on top of red cells. So for example, this one here, that's a platelet on top of a red cell. So that would be included. So you want to make sure that you're carefully counting all of the platelets that you see in the field. And then you want to count if you're doing either way, you want to count about 5 fields minimum.
Yeah, minimum.
Just to give that, qualitative platelet estimate. But if you're quantitative, then you need to write it down and do the math and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so if I could say too, more fields is better, especially for platelet estimates, but be mindful that you don't sacrifice the thickness that's ideal. So if I find it difficult to get 10 fields for my platelet estimate that are similar in thickness, just because of the, sometimes it's the blood, sometimes it's the length of the smear. It's better to have quality than quantity and number of fields, I think, in that respect. But
absolutely,
just a side note.
Well, I think that goes for red cell morph too, depending on
Yes.
how the thing is shaped, the diff itself is shaped, and where's the good area. You know, you might do some of your morph on one line and then have to drop down to another line that might be a little bit thicker to really get the rest of your fields and have you be comfortable with calling your morph.
It's very true. All right. And so, you know, rule of thumb, right? It's going to vary by institution exactly how you do your platelet estimate.
Yep.
But maybe we could talk about how we do it. What do you think? The numbers we use?
Yeah. Yep. Do you want to do one platelet estimate together?
Sure. Yeah. And then realize too that the camera and the field that's represented for the recording is not going to be one-to-one what it's like eyes and scope, right? But you know, if I were to count this one, let's see.
You can do it together. There's 1,
Sure.
3,
3,
4, 5.
Your mouse skills are on point.
Oh, I just said it.
That's staying in. That's staying in.
No, but I'm trying to erase it and I can't get it erased. Right, yeah, no, that's fine. It can stay in. Raw. All right, 7, 8.
But yeah, Melissa's using a pad on a laptop and pretty accurate. That's better handwriting than me. The pen.
11.
Cool.
Now I'm gonna count this guy up here.
Oh yeah, cool. Yep.
I think that's
So we got 12, right? And so count them up, average them across the fields, right? And I think the range we use is, what is it, 6 to 20 is adequate or something like that.
It's about that.
Yeah. So roughly speaking, 6 to 20 platelets per field represents a normalish numerical platelet count.
Yep. So if we were doing a qualitative platelet estimate, that's what we would do. Would just count, let's say 5 fields, and if we see 12-ish in all 5 fields, it's normal.
Yep.
And then if we're actually doing the math, we would physically write down 12, count the next field, X number, and then you would add up all 5 fields, average that together, and then multiply it. But by whatever your multiplication factor is for your institution, it'll vary by your scope that you're using. So you multiply it by that number, and that would give you your quantitative platelet estimate.
Yep.
So I'm gonna clear up my scribbles there.
Yeah, and then what else would we do here? I mean, I guess we would start a diff at that point, right?
Yeah.
But,
You would. I mean, it depends, right? I would do my diff first.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And then I would do my red cell morph, and then I would do my platelet estimate. So at this point, I'd probably be done.
Yeah, that's a good point. I usually do start with my diff. And so the advantage to starting with the differential too is you might see an infrequent thing that might be important to find, right? So one of the things that comes to mind is perhaps a blood parasite or something. You might check 5, 6, 10, 10 fields and maybe not see it. But then the course of doing the diff, if you're just kind of paying attention, generally scanning the background red cells, you might pick something like that up.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the advantage. And don't just hyper focus. You got to pay attention to everything while you're doing the diff. So, in this field, like there's a lymph. Let's see, I'm going to move it and it's going to move in the wrong direction.
Yeah, this is really difficult to do.
I got it. So like we might be like, lymph, hooray, but I don't want to just see the lymph and go to the next field. I really want to lymph, quick scan, nothing exciting, move on to the next field.
Yep. Which
you're going to be like, that is going to take me forever.
Well,
in the beginning it does, but just like everything else, with practice, you can get used to it.
Absolutely.
But I think that's it for this video then, for how to find a good peripheral blood smear field for a differential, and then red cell morphology, and then platelets.
Yeah. No. I think that's all I got. That's for sure. But thanks for everybody for tuning in. It was fun. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you'd like notifications whenever we post a new video. And feel free to reach out to us on social media or via email with comments or suggestions about future content. Thanks.